Today I'd like to show you how I repair the mesh panels on C-band satellite dishes. When you rescue these dishes, a lot of them have been sitting out in the elements for 20, 30 years and they get a variety of damage on them. Holes in the mesh, they get dents. Sometimes even the mesh panels will come right out of the frame. I'll show you some of the techniques I use to make them look good again and make them as functional as possible. C-band satellite is very much a DIY hobby. If you're going to have a C-band dish, you really should know how to make some basic repairs to it, because there are no more C-band satellite repair shops, at least as far as I know. And C-band satellite is definitely the place to be if you like free satellite television in North America. If you've never heard of C-band satellite or you've never heard of free satellite television, then check out the description of this video for links to more videos I've made about this wonderful hobby. Here's a mesh panel from a 10-foot dish I rescued, and this one's got quite a bit of damage on it. Right down here in the corner, it's got some holes in the mesh. It's also got a little bit of moss and junk on it. I'll show you how I clean some of that off. And this panel here, the mesh has come right out of the frame. So I'll show you how I put that back in place as well. So we'll get this panel looking a little better. I like to start by cleaning the panel off, and I use a broom, a wire brush, whatever I need to kind of get lots of the leaves and moss and stuff like that off of it. You can also hose the panel down, just spray it off with some water and get all the junk that accumulates around the frame off there as much as possible. Sometimes you'll get dirt and leaves trapped between the mesh and the frame. Usually on these dishes there are screws holding the mesh to the frame. You can carefully remove those screws and then use a flat bar or a screwdriver or spray it with a hose to remove all that gunk, and then carefully replace the screws after. Okay, now that this panel has had a chance to dry from being sprayed off, you can start dealing with some of the damage on it here. One of the easiest things to repair are these little tiny dents like this. Sometimes this happens from hail or pine cones or branches falling out of trees. And these are simple enough to repair. What I use is a mallet or a hammer and a block of wood to back the dent and just carefully tap them out until they're flattened and returned to their original state. Another common repair you have to make on these dishes is the mesh coming right out of the frame like this. This can happen for a variety of reasons: wind, snow loads, or other damage from Mother Nature. This can be done with a flat pry bar or a flat screwdriver. Just carefully pry the ribs on that metal frame up very carefully. Don't pry it up too high though, because you could cause metal fatigue and possibly break it. Just work your way along, prying up the metal as much as you need to, and then you can kind of work the mesh back into place. Try to flatten it out and use the pry bar to kind of push it back underneath, and then just use a mallet to gently tap the metal frame back down, and use your finger to kind of feel where the high spots are and tap it back down, making it as smooth as possible. Okay, that's looking a lot better already. And then to deal with these holes in the mesh, what I like to do is just carefully fold the mesh back down. Try to flatten it out as much as possible. Be careful you don't cut your fingers though on it. And once you get it flattened out, I like to mend it back together using some thin copper wire. 22 or 24 gauge wire works well for this, and I just kind of stitch it back together. Usually I start by weaving the wire through both sides of the cut and then twisting it together so it doesn't come apart. And then you can just basically stitch the mesh back together with the wire. And when you get to the end, just loop the wire back through itself and twist it a couple of times to prevent it from coming apart. All right, that's all stitched up. Just don't ask me to customize your suit for you though. I usually dress up these repairs with some flat black spray paint just to make it look as original as possible and get it back to working order. Don't use a glossy paint, use a flat paint finish, because a glossy paint will refract and scatter the signal and send it everywhere except where it's supposed to go, to your LNB. Okay, that looks a lot better than when we started. Now this panel is ready to go on a dish and ready to bring in some free satellite TV. Here's a couple of spots that I repaired on my dish last year, and these repairs have worked out well.